This is another PC build. Well, it's about to be. We have to put it together. And 90% of these parts are from the same manufacturer, that being MSI, the sponsor of this one. Now, usually when you have the same parts from the same brand all going into one case, it goes one of two ways. Either it looks super good because, of course, the same manufacturer took care of everything from aesthetics to performance, and it just looks like everything belongs where it should, or it looks too clashy because there's like the same logo smashed everywhere and yada yada yada. Now in MSI's case, their branding really isn't too in your face. I've always loved their logo. I think they have one of the best logos in the business, but they don't really like shove that directly into your face and be like, hey, this is an MSI product. I mean, if you know, you know, and come on, who doesn't like dragons? So here's everything they sent for this build, and bear with me, I don't have a script. I'm just gonna be reciting it off memory, and it's not gonna, probably not gonna be the smoothest playback. Anyway, this is the Gungnir, I think is how you say it, or Gungnir 110R, a very compact mid-tower, 3 120mm RGB fans up front, a fourth here at the rear. You get an aesthetic sort of play at the front. It's not super airflowy, but they do have options for that if you are interested. I like the way this one looks though. We also have an MEG or a MEG Z690 Unify. This is their newest motherboard on the latest Intel platform. It supports everything from PCIe Gen 4 to the latest 12th gen Alder Lake Intel CPUs, of course, all the way up to the 12900K, which we have, of course, for this build. And also, can I say, whoever designed this board, the aesthetics of it are just fire. For power, we've got an A750GF, also from MSI. This is a very compact 80+ gold power supply, fully modular, should be perfect for this compact mid-tower. The MEG Core Liquid S360 is up next. Now this, of course, is a 360mm all-in-one liquid cooling solution for our 12900K, but the real kicker is it is a built-in LCD screen atop the CPU block, which means it can tell us important stats like CPU and fluid temperature, things like that. Very cool. We have an MSI Spatium M480. This is a Gen 4 NVMe SSD, which means we're gonna get super fast reads and writes. Of course, we can finally utilize those speeds on an Intel platform. Then we've got some super sweet DDR5 from Kingston. Oh, and I just realized we don't have a graphics card yet. Yeah, how about an AMD Radeon RX 6800. Hey, how you doing? So now I believe everything is here. This build should be pretty straightforward, though I've said that more than once and regretted it in the long run. So let's see how this goes. So the components we'll want to start with first, obviously, we'll need our motherboard. We're going to take care of our platform. Along with that, we're going to need our DDR5 here from Kingston. We'll also, of course, need our CPU, the good old 12900K, and we might as well throw in the Spatium M480 as well, since, this needs to be connected directly to the motherboard via an M.2 slot. And behold how sexy this motherboard is. Now, I've already used it actually for a different build. I just couldn't help myself. But it looks so dang good. It's got nice, just dark gray and black accents everywhere. No awkward colors. It works. It just works. I don't know how else to word it. I think my favorite part of this board aesthetically is the dragon. Of course, you gotta have the dragon somewhere, and here it's nice and subtle. It's actually indented. It sticks up slightly from the remainder of this surface here. And it just, again, just works. Now these LGA 1700 sockets can be a bit more finicky than some of the previous ones you might be used to. It is obviously a bit larger as well. We're gonna go ahead and drop in our 12900K. We're gonna mine the orientation, of course. The chip and the socket are both notched in multiple places, so you shouldn't be able to slot that thing in incorrectly, but I've seen it done. And then we're gonna very gently, but aggressively, in another sense of the word, because you have to put a lot of pressure on this lever here. I'm gonna take care of that. So there we go, CPU's installed. Now you can see for DDR5, slots 2 and 4 are the ones of interest for us. And we'll slide in the first DIMM. Let's see how easy that is. Yep, about the same as it is with DDR4. The slots are more or less identical, but the pinouts are completely different, which is why you have to be mindful of what kind of board you're buying. See, some LGA 1700 motherboards support DDR4 instead of DDR5. You won't find those support both, despite the slots being identical, because again, the pinouts are different. So even if it looks like a DDR4 module is gonna fit in this particular board here, which of course from MSI supports only DDR5, it will not work without DDR5 kits. So be mindful of that up front. Just know which one you're buying into. If you expect to be able to get a hold of DDR5 and you want to kind of buy into the longevity of that platform up front, then buy a compatible motherboard. And after taking care of both our Spatium NVMe SSD and some preliminary mounting gear setup stuff for our 360mm AIO, which is just much easier to take care of this when the motherboard is out of the case, we need to put this motherboard in the case. So yeah, let's do that. Should fit nice and snug here inside the 110R, and that's what I love about these mid-towers. Again, very compact, doesn't take a ton of hardware to properly fill these out, and that means that it can effectively keep the cost down as well. You don't need 10 hard drives or a custom loop to make it look like you've put all the hardware you possibly can in here. So with the board now situated, let's get it tightened down. And now take care of some early cable management, including front I/O, which I suggest taking care of, especially before you get the power supply in here, because once that gets in here and you've got a bunch of other cables to deal with at the same time, it's going to become all rat's nesty. So yeah, I speak from experience there. So here is front panel, HD audio, USB 3, God, I hate that connector, and Type-C. Which way is it going to go? I got it wrong, of course. I always get it backwards. Flip her around, and just like that. Okay, I think that's about it for now. So this is what we've got going on so far without the power supply even installed, and you can see how busy it all is. I've got this one SATA power cable hanging down because I do need to remember to connect that, but everything else is already connected to the board, and yeah, it's already kind of messy. You see all those RGB cables over there running to the fans. So I've kind of just routed those under these included Velcro straps. Really nice that those are in this case, by the way. Everything else is, yeah, it's about as good as I could get it. A couple things hanging down, but what can you do? So let's get, we can do the power supply next or the AIO. Actually, let's do the AIO because that will add just a bit more clutter back here. Okay, yeah, this is definitely gonna make things just a bit more complicated. This is just for the AIO, folks. Now, I already mentioned that this block has a built-in LCD screen, which of course is dope. Let's give it that peel. Oh, yes, so nice. And look, when it's not on, it just looks like a mirror, which is pretty cool. But the other really cool thing about this one underneath is that there is a small fan that provides active cooling to your VRM and MOSFET around the socket. So you're actually killing two birds with one stone here. Not many AIOs do this, and I think this is really cool of MSI. Let's see if I can remove this housing. Pretty straightforward. I think it's just held on by magnets, so that's cool. You can see the screen is at the very top, and underneath that is the fan. So it's a small fan. It's not going to be like super quiet or anything, although you can, of course, fine tune this so that it doesn't run super loud if it's not your cup of tea. So you have that flexibility there. But this active cooling is quite nice. And of course, it's sandwiched again right between the cold plate where the pump usually is, and you've got your fins and everything for dissipating that heat from the CPU and the screen on top here. So really cool what they've done. Yes, it's a thicker CPU block top to bottom, but most of the space above an AIO block anyway is unused in a build, so I don't mind that it's a bit thicker, kind of like it's like a double whopper or something, but it's cool. Now I'm going to be pairing these stock fans in this case with the radiator. Of course, we could be using the ones that are included in the AIO's box, but these are RGB compatible and they are already kind of pre-wired into the case, so I'm just going to stick with what we have in here. Now this might drive some of you a bit crazy. I have already kind of test fit this just to make sure that what I'm doing actually works with a tube length and whatnot, but I'm going to be installing this cooler this way. Now, the MSI logo is going to be upside down, and I tried flipping these little plates, but they don't line up because it's not a symmetrical CPU block, so it does get it does get a bit convoluted there. But if you ignore the small logo, everything else looks fantastic this way. If we had done it the way that MSI intended, a few issues here. So the first is that the tubing kind of just sticks out, and it does that because you've got these little indentions here in the block itself that don't allow us to fully press these tubes down. So that's gonna be an issue with our graphics card. And for two, I just don't like the way this looks. I mean, this just looks really messy here. Again, partly because it does stick out so far. So running things like this will allow us to keep the tubing out of the way, pretty much out of sight, which is very clean. And yeah, we've got all this space down here for graphics card and other things that we wanted. Right, so all this is now cleaned up and connected. Just clip that back together. I love that this is magnetic. It's so easy to work around. Let's go ahead and get the power supply in now, and then the last thing to install will be the graphics card. Now I did remove the hard drive cage at the bottom of this one. The radiator would have hit it where it was originally. We could have slid it about an inch toward the back, but that would have just cramped the power supply space a bit. Probably would have fit, but since we're not using a hard disk drive for this build, it's really easier just to remove it outright, and you can do that here. So we're gonna slide this power supply in from the right side, move some of these cables out of the way, and it should be pretty straightforward. So it'll sit just like that there. We'll tighten things down at the rear and start connecting everything up. Get that 24 pin in there. There we go. And now it's time for the holy grail, the graphics card, the RX 6800 XT. This is the one directly from AMD. And let me tell you folks, it's a good looking card. So she's chunky, yes, but she's also rocking a very similar profile to the MSI stuff already in our build. The lighter silver, we can work with, but the remainder of it is looking so good. Nice matte black finish. We've got little red accents going around the sides. I think we're gonna go with red RGB for this build. So we're gonna set the fans to red when we fire the system up. But this thing is mighty good looking. So let's remove these two slot covers right here and here. And watch out, they might come crashing down. Yep, there, I saw that coming. Usually how it goes with these. And in goes the graphics card. This is always such an emotional moment for me. Oh yes. Oh yeah. Get her in there, come on. Oh yeah. That is a good looking build. Let's connect her to power. Take care of that there, and then we'll cable manage just a bit. Now I would typically be a bit less than content with this, but considering how much we're working with here, how many cables, just because of like the RGB and other things, RGB always adds a ton of clutter behind the motherboard tray, so be wary of that. But if you can take it on, and handle the task and route things accordingly, it can look somewhat clean. And so if you have to ever, remove the right side panel again and start working back here, it should be pretty straightforward knowing where your cables are routed so that you can rerun those if you need, or maybe add things, take things away. That's really the point of trying to keep things organized back here. Just makes the process easier in the future for replacing and adding new components. So let's get the right side panel on. It's actually right here by the camera, awkward close up. That doesn't really take too much right there. And then the back, just like that. And then 2 screws, that's it. Very simple. I don't need to apply like all 140-ish pounds of my body weight onto the right panel to get it to lock in. And so that indicates to me there's quite a bit of cable management space behind the motherboard tray of the 110R, and that's a good thing. And there is definitely space back here, ample space I would say for even the crazier build. If you wanted to do a custom loop or something in this case, you'd have a bit extra cabling than we have already here. No problem. Not a problem at all. And there we are, a very clean looking build. Now nothing's lit up yet. We haven't tried powering it on, which is the next step. But I've got to say, without any lights at all, this still looks very sleek. It's a very stealthy looking build. Apart from the card, which has obviously again those red accents, it's a one big red accent that wraps around the side of the card's profile. Everything else is just very subdued, and I really like builds like that. You don't see too many of them nowadays. But now it's time to fire things up, and there's always just a tad bit of nervousness that finds its way into my head every single time I get ready to fire one of these up. Like, did I wire everything correctly? I've done this like 100 times and I still get concerned. So let's see what happens. So we got power at the motherboard. That's at least initially a good sign. Ooh. And everything's already set to red by default. And that actually worked out. We didn't even have to tweak anything. I think there is a button up front on the case that you can cycle, and that will change the colors of the fans, because those are hooked up to the RGB hub that's included with the case. I can hear fluid churning in the AIO, which is a good sign, means our pump is functioning properly. There might be a few air pockets and things that you hear in the very beginning. That tends to be the case with these AIOs, but over time that should circulate and get out of the block at least, which is where you'll typically hear it, because the pump is usually in the block. And if you're worried about the orientation of this AIO because of something you read on some forum or maybe saw in some video and took out of context, this setup is fine. Barb height is much higher than pump height, which means we shouldn't be worried about tons of air bubbles being churned through the loop over and over, which could kill it. That undoubtedly can happen in certain scenarios, but this is not one of those. I want to make that very clear here. It's not as though we could even have mounted this up front anyway, and there's not enough space for tubes to be routed. If we flip this like barb side down, it just, to me that looks so stupid anyway. But yeah, everything looks really good. I mean, the fans are already set up the way we wanted. We've got the LED, the red LED here, and the Radon logo, of course matching the red accent in the card anyway. And man, I mean, this is rocking and rolling. Jeez. Now, I didn't mention this earlier, but if you want to find any of the parts we used in this video to put this system together, you can find those linked in this video description, tied to our Amazon affiliate accounts. So if you want to support us there, we get a small kickback. It's usually like 1, 2, or 3% of the total price of the component in question. But even if you don't buy the product whose link you click on from our description, anything else you buy through that link, we'll still get a small kickback for. So that again, that support is appreciated. And if you want to build something like this, I mean, by all means, it's all linked down there for you to check out. And I've got to say, the one thing that I'm really surprised by, of course, I love the AIO. I love any AIO with a screen on it, especially the way that MSI has done it here, where they've made it also functional by including a small fan for active cooling around the VRM MOSFET area. I also really like the case. The case I really didn't think it would stand out. You know, when I think of like ideal mid-towers, I don't really think of MSI cases. At least I haven't traditionally. But this one here, the Gungnir, or however you pronounce it, Gungnir 110R. Anyway, we'll work on the name later. It's really impressed me. It's very functional. It's just the right size, I think, for a mid-tower. You can see that we filled out a lot of the space just by using a single discrete card, which is nice. You can fit a 360mm up front, fans up top if you want extra, which we didn't populate, and you still get plenty of cable management space behind the motherboard tray. It's the best of all 3 or 4 worlds. How many points did I mention there? So anyway, I think that the real highlight of this build, at least for me, is the case. The case really made things come together. But of course, we've got the MSI power supply, the MSI motherboard, the MSI cooler, the MSI friggin' NVMe drive. Like, they make a lot now. And if you're really pushing for something that's like just very cohesive, I don't know how else to describe it. If you just want to use the same brand for pretty much every PC component you could think of, you could build an MSI PC today. I mean, and you can make it look really darn good. You know, it's again one of those things that is very easy to work out if you stick within the same component ecosystem, that being in this case MSI. These parts are just going to work really well together. So if you're an aesthetic kind of person like I am, but you still value performance, they make plenty of performance products that also look really good. The best of both worlds in that case. So with that, if you guys enjoyed watching this one being assembled, be sure to let me know by giving this one a thumbs up. That would be greatly appreciated. Again, I want to give MSI a huge shout out for sponsoring this video, allowing us to put together a build that I have not put together before. I put together a few other builds that have been like all one brand before, but this one from MSI is my first, and it looks pretty darn good. I honestly wouldn't be against using this case for my personal rig in the future. They do make a more of like an airflow oriented version of this case. I might buy that one instead, but this one here just looks really good. And by the way, I haven't put on the left side panel yet. Let me get it. It's right here. And another thing I really like about this is that it is not very dark, the tempered glass. It's not super tinted. Let's see, it should just slide on in. There we go. Look at that, the sheer beauty of it. You know, it's not too dark, so you don't just see the LED, you actually see the other components inside of here. That's always a pet peeve of mine. It's like the super dark tinted glass. What's the point? I mean, unless all you care about is looking at little LEDs that are barely shining through, like, why else would you even have a transparent side panel, and a hardly transparent side panel at that. So this one is just the right tint, I think, and maybe even a little lighter tint than this would be optimal. But yeah, looks really good. If you guys want to, again, build something like this, those parts are linked below. Consider subscribing to the channel if you have not already. That would be greatly appreciated. Leave a comment letting me know what you'd like to see in the future down below. Almost got tongue twisted there. And I will catch you in the next one. My name is Greg. Thanks for building with me.